Okay, we'll take it from here, shall we? Let's just do it. If you sign on to go live at the last post, I'm terribly sorry. I hit the wrong button, obviously. Here we are this evening. Hopefully you're following me. So, I've lost track of the days actually, but we're on chapter 14. So we've travelled a fair bit since we started. Aaron, oh, lovely to see you, mate. My little great nephew's online. Not sure who else is on, but we're now on chapter 14 of Fearless, the diary of an 18-year-old at war in the Falklands. Good to see you, young Aaron. Chapter 14, The Curse of the Albatross. Wednesday, 19th. Hi, Ange. Still outside the Tez. No action stations, but plenty of cross-decking from Canberra to us. They transferred 40 commando to us, and now we have 1,500 men on board. Atlantic Conveyor rendezvoused with Invincible to transfer the Harriers. She also gave some to the Hermes. Food's been cut down. All we had for dinner was one pasty and a cup of soup and a piece of bread. Debbie? Doing another RAS with Typal. One seeking from Hermes has ditched 2240. 7 survivors picked up so far, 2246. There were 29 men on board, of which only 7 were picked up. The helo split as it hit the water and sunk. Almost instantly. The pilot survived and said all he heard was a loud bang, and the next thing he knew, he was in the water. It is believed to have been an albatross flying into the tail rotors. This was a really hectic day for every part of the task force. The Atlantic Conveyor had joined up with the main task force and began distributing her load. Her load of Harriers to add to the main Harrier force. These were mainly GR3 ground attack RAF Harriers that had not been tested at sea. The additional RAF pilots really did have to learn very quickly how to land onto a moving deck. The target landing area on a grey ship, hidden on the horizon between sky and sea in thousands of miles of dark ocean, is a tiny speck compared to miles of airfield until they were used to it. Fortunately, the weather on this day, although grey and murky with reduced visibility and low cloud, was not very windy, and the surface swell was low, so the ships were not rolling too heavily. In times of war, risks are taken that would not be in peacetime. Cross-decking troops in the middle of an ocean is one of them. This would generally be done in sheltered waters, so that when we lowered the stern gate... Hi, May. When we lowered the stern gate and allowed the water to flow into the ship to create a floating dock, we reduced the risk of waves rushing into the ship and swamping the tank deck. In the conditions we were facing, the best we could do was to turn the ship in such a way that the waves would be crashing against the opposite side of the ship, thus creating relative calm. Whilst it helped doing much to protect those involved, it was still dangerous and would normally carry unacceptably high risk. We in the Canberra stayed fairly close to reduce the distance the landing craft had to sail between ships. There were a large number of people involved with the smaller landing craft, the crews in the loading dock, and on the davits that lowered the LCVPs, and not to mention the Royal Marines who had to climb down rope ladders with their full kit into the small landing craft, rising up and down over 6-foot swells and waves against the side of the ship. Nevertheless, we achieved it. and there was a steady flow of craft in and out of the floating dock at the back of the ship. Hello, Helen. There's some good people coming in at the moment. I'll talk about those when I finished. When the cross-decking was complete, we had 465 Royal Marines from 40 Commando, taking our total of men on board to 2,000. This was far in excess of what we were designed to carry. It took hours for the cross-decking to be completed, and sadly, that day was not to end without disaster. During one of the aircraft sorties, a Sea King carrying 29 SAS soldiers had a suspected bird strike and hit the water, turning over immediately and trapping a majority of the troops inside as it sunk to the bottom of the ocean. The helicopter was heavily overloaded. I do not know why, but it would appear that the SAS, whose motto is "Who dares wins," were daring to take the biggest risks and speed up the process. All right, Nubby. Good to see you, Rob. Sadly, 21 men lost their lives, including Corporal Doc Love, RM DSM, of 846 Naval Air Squadron. 846 Naval Air Squadron are the Royal Marines Helicopter Wing, or Junglies, and we're our embarked Naval Air Squadron, and we're very much part of the ship's company. During the South Georgia operation, the SAS were advised not to land on the Fortuna Glacier, but their CO refused to listen and insisted this was the best place for the troops to carry out their recce and advance from. We lost 2 Wessex helicopters and very nearly a third who went in to rescue the original crew, the rescue helicopter and the SAS troop. We have to be grateful that at that time we did not lose any men, but I believe many of those men that survived the Fortuna Glacier probably lost their lives later in this other pointless exercise. They were not to blame for the bird strike, but the load in the aircraft must have had an effect on the flying. The loss of these men had a massive effect on our morale. We had lost shipmates on the Sheffield. 2 Harriers had collided in mid-air, and the pilots were missing, presumed dead. And now, 21 of our very best had just died. Not to diminish the loss of life, another disaster had befallen us. The day before, our nutty supply had run out. You need to understand the importance of nutty to a matlow. Nutty Reed sweets. It is what keeps the fleet afloat, and masking tape, of course. And if a matlow cannot get his daily sweets and chocolate bar fix, life can be hell. It is one of the reasons we have the naffy, or the can man, on board. The other, of course, being the beer issue. Due to the need for more storage and priority supplies, we could not keep a full naffy, and therefore our sweet supplies ran out. The Red Cross parcels that were being sent out to the fleet were a godsend. Although the majority went to the Invincible Task Group, they did eventually get to us, and it made for a happier crew. Then, to top it all, our scran was being rationed. To an 18-year-old, this was a real shock to the system. It was delivered around the ship in urns and on trays of hot piping pasties. Read, cool mini pasties. The soup was powdered but hot. The bread was fresh and baked in the galley. We were not able to have fried food like chips, battered fish, etc., because the galley was secured for action, and it would not have been sensible having boiling hot fat and oil on the go whilst the ship was under attack. We still had fruit. Limes were introduced to sailors to reduce scurvy, and it was still important that we had a fresh supply at all times. In the evening, we were served pot mess, a hot steaming stew made up of everything that could be put in it. Meat, don't ask. Potatoes, vegetables, and whatever else the cook saw fit to put in it. It was delicious. Breakfast became a bacon or sausage roll for a while, but thankfully then returned to almost normal as we got used to the timings of the attacks and scheduled our lives around them. Good to see you, Andrew Miller. Thursday the 20th. Entered the TES, total exclusion zone, at 1000-ish when we went to action stations, and we have remained in them all day. At 11:30, we were 130 miles from Stanley. The weather has been good to us, even though it's been bad, with visibility down to half a mile at times and 4 miles at the most. Cloud cover was only 3,000 feet, and we were expecting air attacks if it was clear during daylight hours, but obviously they wouldn't come out in this weather. So now, at 2000, we still haven't been attacked and are now falling out of action stations. We are due to go in tomorrow morning. The tension aboard had really built by this time. The fleet was sailing in silent mode. Hi, Kim. There was no noisy communication being transmitted to each other. Voice circuits, telephony, and radar were all shut down. Every manoeuvre that was made was signalled by flag, as in the days of Nelson, or by flashing lights. Each signal that was hoisted by the command ship was repeated along the lines astern and abeam. Just before the signal was executed, the hoist was wiggled, and a minute later, hauled down. This was repeated with all the ships in the formation, and all the ships manoeuvring at almost exactly the same time. This was what being a signalman was all about. As exciting and exhilarating as it was to see it all working so well, there was still the fear that we would get attacked by an Exocet missile. We knew what had happened to our shipmates on the Sheffield, and we had a mixture of emotions about it, from outrage to the obvious fear that it could be us next. The one shining light was that there was no sun shining. The sea was slightly choppy. It was wet, misty, and murky. The sky and sea were almost as one, and at times the cloud cover was low enough to cover the top of our mast. This added to the atmosphere and surreal image of a fleet at war. Looking out across the sea, I could see a huge armada all around us. It was an impressive and awe-inspiring sight, sailing into battle just as our predecessors had done, and the films, such as in which we served, demonstrated so well. It really was like an old black and white film due to the clouds being so grey, so low, and the damp adding to the grainy visage. But what an image, and what a fleet. If I'd been an Argentine spotter seeing what was coming towards me, I would have run like hell. It always amazed me how we managed, I'm supposed to be timing this, sorry. Always amazed me how we managed to get so many ships so close to shore during D-Day in June 1944. Now, it was my turn to experience this. With the knowledge that what we were about to do was perhaps even more dangerous because of the geography of the islands and the narrow waterways we had to sail through to get to our D-Day anchorage. The captain, as a submariner, was invited by the Commodore to work with Lieutenant Commander John Prime on anti-submarine measures for the amphibious force and overall deceptive measures. And the captain was also given full control of the passage and anchorage for the amphibious force, while the Commodore and Brigadier thought ahead for the landings and the assault. Thus, for the first hours of the final passage to San Carlos, as the landing site, the force steered roughly for Port Stanley in case the Argentinians should detect us. We knew they believed we would undertake the landings near our final objective. Then, as darkness gathered, We altered our base course westerly to pass well north of East Falkland, then turning southwest before finally south to make the entrance to Falkland Sound, which divided the two main islands. The captain sailed the ships as close to the West Falkland shore as he dared. This was because he was sure that if the entrance was mined, the mines would be in the middle of the channel. The Intrepid was not happy about this, but war is all about taking the right sort of risks. In the event, the Argentines did not detect us at all until we entered Falkland Sound and started landing the landing force. In Max Hastings' words, this was arguably the most dangerous moment of the war. I'm just going to adjust the settings and give you another 10 minutes. Lovely to see so many people coming on, and we've had Marion Fazakli on here as well. Marion is our cousin's wife. She's our cousin. Faz was on HMS Coventry, which we will come to as we go through this. Alan Fazakli. And Robert Clark was one of the gunners on the Fearless with me. Good to see him on there. Chapter 15, D-Day. Friday, 21st of May. Just gone 23:59. Visibility getting better and weather improving, making things difficult for us. Action stations at 0130, getting head down for an hour. Arrived in Falkland Sound at approximately 0330 and anchored. Air raid warning red sounded at 0415, and from 0430 to 0700, RG positions were pounded relentlessly from naval gunfire support from Yarmouth and Antrim's 4 5-inch guns, then again at 0830. Closing down from action stations just hours before sailing so close to the islands was a deliberate effort to enable everybody on board to get a bit of a rest, some decent scran, and do what they had to do before they went to war. Captain Larkin and his officers were brilliant at keeping morale up and made every effort to ensure we were looked after. I was on watch till 23:59, so could only try to crash out after I'd handed over to Bill Byrne. The ship remained at defence watches, 50% closed up. We couldn't go below decks, so we set up some sleeping space in the flagstore by laying out a load of flags in their bags on the deck to make a mattress, and half a dozen of us snuggled up in them to rest and keep warm, but sleep wouldn't come. Most of the ship was already at action stations before the alarm sounded at 0130. This was before we were in sight or sound of land, though with the air being so clear down south, I'm sure we could have been heard from the shore. Having spent the whole day in low cloud, mist and rain, the weather as we approached the island started to clear. The cloud cover rose, it broke up, and the stars became visible. The planning for the landings included darkness, and part of the decision-making was landing on a night when there was no moon to reduce the risk of us all being seen. We were sailing in Falkland Sound between East and West Falklands. If you stood on a hilltop looking over the sound, you could have seen 20 plus ships sailing in a single line between the islands. I think this must have been our most vulnerable points of the war, but it was obvious and has been written that the Argentines were not expecting us to approach this way. This had all been worked out on the Fearless with Commodore Michael Clapp, Brigadier Julian Thompson, Royal Marines, Major Ewan Sotheby Taylor, Royal Marines, Captain Jeremy Larkin, and our navigator, Lieutenant Commander John Prime, amongst others. These men saved the lives of many soldiers, sailors, and airmen with their cunning and meticulous planning. Major Sotheby Taylor had been in charge of the Royal Marines detachment in the Falklands during the 70s. He had navigated around the islands on a small yacht that he'd had shipped out and he charted much of the waters that had not been charted before. His knowledge of the beaches, inlets, and waterways was immense, and working as a team in the command room on board Fearless, the amphibious command team decided on the best place to carry out the landings and best formations for the anchorages, to protect as many ships as possible from damage, destruction, and loss of assets and lives. As always, I was on the forecastle when it came to anchoring. We could hear the naval gunfire support pounding the positions ashore. There were a team of Argentine Special Forces on Fanning Head at the entrance to San Carlos Water, and this was where a lot of the fire was going. We could also see tracer fire as our own Special Forces attacked the Argentine position. The noise of the ship's engines, let alone the sound of the anchor chain clanging as it found its depth to secure the ship, negated any advantage we have gained during our silent transit towards the islands. With all the noise and gunfire going on ashore, I became worried at how vulnerable we were, not as a ship, but as individuals standing on the forecastle. All it needed was a sniper with a night sight, and we could all have been popped off one by one. We were told to take cover behind the bollards and capstans as we dropped anchor, which is all well and good, but just a few miles on the other side, there could have been a whole load of other troops looking out for us. Everybody within 10 miles must have heard the ships anchoring, and there was no way anybody within 20 miles could not hear the naval gunfire. We had certainly arrived in style. I shall leave it there. I said I'm going to do 15 minutes a night, or perhaps, oh no, there's only a page left. So let me finish this last page before we go on to the next chapter. At 0630, the first wave of troops, 40 Commander and 2nd Para went ashore and met no resistance. We weighed anchor and proceeded further inwards to San Carlos Water. I was on the forecastle, and the Antrim and Yarmouth continued firing. There was gunfire ashore. SAS troops shot down a Pucara, Puma, Chinook, and a Canberra has been shot down. 4 or 5 Commander and 3 Para went ashore whilst we were weighing anchor. We got through the original anchoring and the sailing into San Carlos with little or no bother. Yes, there had been plenty of noise from the guns, and yes, we were closed up at action stations, and our gunners were ready with their World War II 40-60 Bofors, and young Nobby can confirm that, and antiquated Seacat missile systems, ready to take on the modern might of the supersonic Argentine Air Force, and positions ashore. But nothing happened. We sailed in without a shot being fired at us by the Argentines, and without us firing a shot in anger. The weather was clear, calm, and not too cold. The troops went ashore with no resistance. All the landing craft from the Fearless, Intrepid, and the LSLs were busy picking up troops, holding a circular pattern until ordered to leave the ship's leave for shore. A lot of this was again done by flashing light, with Aldis lamps, signalling to the coxswain of the LCU or LCVP command to beach. I felt a mixture of excitement, anticipation, fear, and sorrow for those men going ashore. Here I was, 18 years old, sending signals by flashing light to order men to war, and potentially their death. I was scared that I was now at war, but the unknown of what was going to happen was also adding to the excitement. I knew there was going to be further bloodshed. I knew that some of the men in the landing craft were not going to be coming back. And I knew that we were going to be attacked at some point very soon. I didn't know how I would deal with it when it did happen. We had trained so hard for this day from the day I joined up on the 2nd of June 1980 at 16 and a half. The workups in Portland, war exercises in Norway, where we practiced exactly this in Arctic conditions, just in case we may at some point have to defend Northern Europe against the Russians, to the day we entered the total exclusion zone, and it was all for real. We could train no more. We had to wait and be counted when the time came. I had an overwhelming need to be up top if anything drastic happened to us. If we had to abandon ship or the ship was damaged, I wanted to be out on the bridge wings so I could have space around me. I was determined to do my duty and serve my shipmates well, but not trapped inside. If the order came to abandon ship, I was afraid of having to fight my way blindly out of a burning wreck to survive. On the negative side, by being out in the open, I was also vulnerable to cannon and rocket fire from the aircraft. I had rationalized this by concluding that should I be hit by any of this, it would probably kill me outright. The closest we got to being hit during the initial operation in San Carlos was when a pattern of 3 times 6-inch shells from HMS Antrim gunfire support came towards us, and we watched as first 1, then 2 on the port side got closer, and the 3rd exploded just over the starboard bow. A quick voice communication to the ops room was sent, asking them very kindly to retarget. And there I will finish, because tomorrow, chapter 16, it starts to hot up a little bit, but I'll leave it there, and you can wait in anticipation for what comes next. Thank you. Thanks, Nobby. Yeah, I remember you telling me that, and I know we spent a little bit of time together trying to piece some of it together, but hey, mate, you do what you need to do. It was good to see you on here. I'm here every night at 2000 until I finish it. The intention perhaps is to have it done by Christmas Eve, just as it was when I started writing it properly and getting those 50,000 words out. Thanks, Debbie. Lovely to see you again this evening. Yeah, there were some good people on here tonight. And young Aaron, I don't know if he's still here or he's gone now. But yeah, thank you all for listening and bearing with me. And like I said, Aaron's still there. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks for staying and listening. Okay, Ange, thanks a lot. Cheers, Nobby. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks, Debbie. Catch you tomorrow. And Aaron, just remember, I slayed my dragons. Just remember those dragons are still there. So you take care of yourself and look after everybody. And behave. I know you are. Okay, anybody got any questions, comments? All right. I'll shut off now. Mate, it did me good when I wrote it. And when I finally got round to doing it properly, and I'd cleared most of the crap. And reading this and sharing it now, the reason I'm doing it is that at the start of the month, there was a lot on the news about loneliness. And I'm giving up 1 million minutes for loneliness. So I thought, well, what better way than to share a story, do a bit of a Jackanory and share a story. Fortunately, I've got a story which I can share. And that's what I'm doing this for. And it's so good to see people like you. I had Paul Mortimer on the other day, who has won the ROs on the Fearless, won the Buntings. I think I had somebody else from the Fearless as well. Dave Downey was on. So, yeah, it's good to see people jumping in and out. And I'm doing just 15 minutes or as close as damn it, so people aren't getting too bored with it. Okay, well, I'll leave it there. Thanks, all of you. And we'll see you all again soon. In fact, tomorrow at 2000.